Hello, and welcome to the second episode of JayDHD Writing Lessons, where I'm going to be sharing my personal tips and tricks for writers with ADHD. I am still not a doctor or counsellor or anyone with any kind of medical background, so in the description I have linked some charities that will give you actual medical information on the condition. And just be aware that this week we're going to be discussing mental health, specifically anxiety. And if that is upsetting to you at any point, I recommend clicking off the video and doing something to take care of yourself. I really hope you join me next week when we'll be talking even more about organisation and planning. So, do you remember last week when I told you that this week we'd be talking about organisation in sort of a writing sense? That was a lie. I procrastinated on writing the script. So this week's episode is about procrastination. So starting tasks can be difficult when you have ADHD. Generally, once we've started something, we get into a good rhythm with it and it feels easy and we can do it for a while, but it's the actual sitting down and taking the first steps which feels absolutely impossible. And you find yourself just staring at your desk for hours, wondering why you can't just do this thing that you want to do and you need to do. I used to basically just try and bully myself into starting things, but helpful tip, that doesn't actually work. Or if it does, you'll still feel bad after you've done what you need to do because you've spent all day having these awful negative thoughts. I have never made any kind of progress in my life by being mean to myself. Instead, it's better to take a step back and try and figure out exactly what it is that's keeping you from working, because that way you can build some more constructive solutions. So in my experience, procrastination tends to stem from a combination of two factors: distraction and anxiety. First, we're going to talk about distraction procrastination. So that's when you're struggling to get something done because you're hyperfixating on a video game, or you're stuck refreshing social media, or something else that's fun and stimulating but not necessarily productive. It can be very easy for people with ADHD to get stuck on these kinds of things because of something called dopamine. Now, I am not a scientist, so this will be a very basic but hopefully correct explanation of what dopamine is. Dopamine is one of the hormones that our brain produces that makes us feel good, like serotonin or oxytocin does. So amongst other things, your brain releases dopamine when you finish a task or start a new one. That's one of the reasons why video games can be so addictive, because you're generally given a list of smaller goals with different ways of achieving them, so you're constantly getting those drips of dopamine. Social media apps like TikTok and Instagram are also designed to exploit this, because you're constantly getting fed new content, and every time you refresh the page it's even more new content, so you're constantly getting that little bit of dopamine. This can be kind of a problem for people with ADHD because our brain doesn't absorb dopamine as well as neurotypical people do. So when we find something that gives us that dopamine drip, we kind of hyperfixate on it. Here I've only really talked about social media and video games, but this might be the reason why people with ADHD tend to struggle more with addiction in general. It's okay to indulge in video games sometimes or spend the odd hour stalking people you used to go to school with on Facebook, but if you're finding that these things are eating up so much of your time that you're not achieving your goals, then firstly, don't beat yourself up about it. Like I just said, there's a pretty legitimate brain chemistry reason for it. But secondly, it might do you some good to find a way to moderate your time on these things. I found the best way to stop these distractions is with some kind of content blocking software. Personally, there is no amount of self-discipline that will keep me from scrolling. I just have to make anything distracting literally inaccessible. On my laptop, I have something called Freedom, which allows you to block distracting websites during certain hours of the day. So I have mine set to block everything from 9 AM to 4 PM, because that's generally the hours I'll work on my uni stuff. You do have to pay for Freedom, but there are tons of free options like Chrome extensions. There's one called Stay Focused, which we'll link in the description, that my editor has endorsed. If it's something like a games console where you can't install a blocker on it, I'd recommend making it physically inaccessible or difficult to get. You can buy time-sensitive snack safes where you can lock something up and then it will only be released in 3 or so hours. I don't have one of those. I can't tell you if it works. but my secret trick is when I was in first year, if I had to work on an essay, I used to take my phone and put it in a box of cereal in my kitchen and put the cereal box in the cupboard. And I don't know why it worked so well, but there's just something about going into the kitchen to get your phone out of the cereal that really feels like admitting defeat, and it did help me get a lot of work done. I don't know why. Now let's talk about the other much trickier reason for procrastination, which is fear. 9 times out of 10, when I'm putting off doing a piece of work, it's because I'm scared to get started. I'm scared that I could do it wrong or that I won't achieve all of the things that I want to. You know, I care a lot about writing, so the idea that I could try and do badly at it is scary to me. There's no one single solution to this, and if you're experiencing a level of anxiety that's debilitating to you, you're not alone and there are people who can help. I'm going to share my advice on how I managed to make progress on my projects despite my anxieties, but I do want to make it clear that all of the progress I've made has been done with the help of literal years of therapy. The best cure that I found for procrastination is to do literally whatever I can to make starting the task less overwhelming. Remember what I said earlier about how video games give you a set of tasks and rewards to give you little hits of dopamine that keep you motivated? You can apply those same principles and mechanics to your daily writing. This is a process called gamification. There's a specific website I'm going to be talking about here called For the Words. I found it really helpful in getting started on my projects and making progress. If it doesn't seem like your jam, then there are ways that you can apply the same mechanics in your own ways. For the Words is set up like a classic monster fighting RPG, but the way that you fight monsters is with writing. Each monster has a word count that you need to hit in a certain amount of time, and if you defeat the monsters, you get loot that you can use to upgrade your character or complete quests. It's all fairly simple RPG mechanics, but it does 2 crucial things that have really helped me combat my writing anxiety and just get started. The first thing that For the Words does is that it changes your goal. So when I sit down to write, it always feels like a very loaded activity. You know, I'm never just sitting down to do some writing, I'm sitting down to do some good writing. I'm sitting down to write X chunk of my novel. I'm sitting down to write something that I've had in my head for ages. And while working hard to make something you're proud of really isn't a bad thing, when it comes to writing, perfectionism is a killer. There's a common piece of writing advice that you might have heard at some point, which is to write well, first you must write badly. But writing badly is kind of harder than it sounds. And it can be really difficult to motivate yourself to sit down and do the work when part of you knows that what you create probably won't be as good as you envision it in your head. But when you use For the Words, the goal is kind of shifted. The focus is always on time and word count rather than quality, which is really what you need when you're in the early stages of drafting. It's a lot easier to sit down and write for 20 minutes than it is to sit down and write the first 500 words of your novel, you know? So because your goal has been made kind of smaller, those dopamine jolts you get from achievement are easier to access. This brings me pretty nicely to the second point, which is the inbuilt reward system. You get little in-game rewards for smaller chunks of writing, and you know, even though these rewards don't exist in the real world, they still give you this very immediate sense of achievement and progress. If For the Words doesn't quite seem like your thing, there are plenty of ways that you can set up these kind of mechanics on your own. Just give yourself smaller, time-focused goals with some kind of reward system. You might have heard of the Pomodoro system, where you work for 25-minute bursts with 5-minute breaks in between. When I'm warming up, I actually find that 25 minutes is way too long for me. There have actually been times when I've literally just set a timer for 3 minutes, written for 3 minutes, taken a 3-minute break, until I feel like I'm in a good rhythm and ready to work for longer chunks of time. Just break the task into chunks that are so small that you're confident in your ability to do them. So for a reward system, I really like something like a sticker chart or a tick chart. I actually had to use one to finish making this video today. Just anything that gives you some kind of visual evidence of the progress you've made. My final piece of advice for how to make starting your writing easier is don't jump in on your main project immediately. Warm up with some free writing first. If you're not familiar with it, the goal of free writing is just to keep your pen moving. You set a timer and you write as many words down as you can before the time runs out. There is absolutely no pressure on quality for this. I'm fairly sure that there have been free writing sessions where I have just written one long extended scream. Just keep your pen moving. That's all you need to worry about. At the end of this video, I'm going to leave a little free writing prompt. Once you finish watching, you can grab a pen and paper, copy the prompt onto the top of the page and set a 1-minute timer, and then just write whatever pops into your head. No wrong answers. If anyone's interested, I could record a longer kind of free writing warm-up session or potentially live stream it. I can take you through a couple of different prompts and I do them with you and share some of my own free writing just to help you get a feel for it. Back when we had lectures on campus, we used to do these kinds of exercises to warm up all the time and I really enjoyed them, so I could try and recreate something like that for you guys. When you have ADHD, the first steps of a task are often the hardest, so literally anything that you can do to make starting easier will make a huge difference for you. Just to recap, here are a couple of ideas that you can try to hopefully make that first step come a little easier. Number 1, cut yourself off from your distractions. Number 2, give yourself a small, achievable, time-centered goal. Number 3, build yourself some kind of reward system. And number 4, warm up with free writing until you're feeling confident. I'll leave links to all of the software and websites that I've mentioned in this video down in the description. There's also going to be a free writing prompt at the end of the video. If you're confident, you can share your responses in the comments or email them to me at jay.adhdwriter@outlook.com. I'm not going to be marking them or anything. It can just kind of be a confidence boost to share your work with someone, and also any kind of responses I get to this video really do help with my assessment. I really hope you join me next week, where I swear we will actually be talking about how to organize your writing life. Or potentially you can join me a little bit sooner if there's any interest in that longer free writing video. That's all for this video. I hope you have a great week and I will hopefully see you next Friday. Bye. I can read?
Yeah. Damn, girl.
Damn, girl, you know how to read? Oh, when she literate though.
Oh.